Guys, I know you're so excited for your first video. I'm really excited to make it for you. I must really like you because I'm in my classroom and I just checked 310 degrees. I'm not even kidding. I am a little bit, but it's warm, so let's get started. So I just posted your outline for you that says week 2, and I want you to go to that one to where it says the Glorious Revolution. If you remember, that's where we left off in class today. So the Glorious Revolution for us takes place in England, something that we shouldn't care that much about, right? But if we look closely, it's going to teach us lessons because everything that happens in England right now is going to affect what's going on in the colonies. We know we're paying attention to them culturally, politically, economically, right? Everything is going to have repercussions for us. So if we look at ourselves before the Glorious Revolution takes place in England, we're being pretty self-sufficient. We're still totally being taken advantage of with the mercantilism, correct? But we're kind of completely ignoring the Navigation Acts. We're like, what are those? I'm going to smuggle all day, every day. We have our own fishing, our own ironworks. We have a lot of our own foreign markets too. We're breaking those trade laws. And Charles II starts to tighten the reins because he starts to see this increasing disobedience, right? And he starts to think, hold on, what are they doing? We need to show them who's boss, and it's us. He is going to die. When Charles II dies, something pretty controversial and dramatic happens in England. James II, who is his brother, becomes king. But here's the thing, in this very Protestant country, James II is Catholic. And we know that is no good to people in England. They don't want that. They are not all about the Catholics. Just ask Oliver Cromwell, right? So James II is going to tighten that control in the colonies even more. And he's going to put in certain people in charge. He's going to revoke a lot of charters from New England. He's going to send someone whose name is Sir Edmund Andros to make sure that we are following things. He starts to tax people's wine and rum and brandy. People are not pleased when you start to tax their alcohol, right? The colonists don't want that. And they start to really resent the fact that they are losing a lot of these freedoms and things that they've been doing on their own, right? And now someone's messing with their stuff. So that's us. Let's go back to England and James II. James II, as we said, is Catholic. English Protestants want him out, right? There's some really cool Jacobin history here we could go much further into. But the recap quickly is that he is going to be someone people put up with, and then bam, it turns out his wife is about to have a son. So for England, this means not just one Catholic king, but now the possibility of 2 Catholic kings, and they are not about to go there, right? So they are going to start to devise a plan. Parliament is going to go with English Protestants and approach his daughter, and his daughter's name is Mary, and she is married to William. You got it. And this is William and Mary College, of course. They are both Protestant. Her husband is Dutch, and she agrees to go along with it and throw her dad under the bus so that she can become queen. Now that is like some House of Cards stuff, right? That is cutthroat. That is cutthroat. So they are going to co-rule England. James II is tossed out. He has to flee in the British Isles. It's this whole thing. And Parliament is going to pass the English Bill of Rights because they learned a lesson. And they said, wait a second. This was almost really bad. We almost lost a lot of power. We had a despotic ruler, and we have to make sure this never happens again. So they come up with this laundry list of all of the things that are going to be limiting the power of the monarch and give elected officials like those in Parliament and the people more say, okay? So even though this happens an ocean away, we are watching. We are paying attention to this. We are very happy when things like the Dominion of New England and Sir Edmund Andros go away, because now James is out, so they are out. We even start to like revolt a little bit and get super excited about this, and it shows that, you know, we're paying attention, we're in it. But here's the thing. After England has the Glorious Revolution, they're quite busy. They have new leaders, they have the Bill of Rights to draft, they have all these things going on, and they are going to be distracted. Guess what? We love that. Just like I know you'd be so upset if your parents were like, we're leaving town for a weekend, here's a credit card, I'm so sorry that you're going to be on your own. You'd be like, I know, and then you shut the door and you go, ah, right? Because you'd be excited because you have freedom, right? That's what's going on here. So England is too busy. So we enter into a period that we're going to call salutary neglect. And if you've ever read Charlotte's Web, you know that salutation, salutary means like welcoming or healthy, right? So salutary neglect, usually neglect with an N-E in front of it, we know it's a negative connotation. If you neglect a child, that's a bad thing. If you neglect a group of colonies that wants to be independent, they're going to do a little jig. They're excited, right? So salutary neglect means England is neglecting us, but we do better than ever because they're not trying to watch us and keep control of us, right? So we're going to see that. Salutary neglect, we're better off, we gain more independence, and we gain more prosperity. We're doing our own trade, we're doing our own political life, local governments become more powerful. And think about the Glorious Revolution like a seed tucked in the back of our heads, right? We watched a monarch successfully become deposed, right? And then we got really excited about the Bill of Rights and we said, that's a great idea. And they said, that doesn't apply to you. That only applies to people in England. Now we know England's going to have lots of colonies all over the world, right? But here's the thing. This colony, the 13 colonies, these are all English people, right? These are people who are English, and they're not going to really take too kindly to people from England telling them they're not going to be treated like English people, because they see themselves as such. They see themselves as actual English citizens, and that is a huge difference when we talk about the revolution later on, right? But again, they watch this whole thing, Bill of Rights, monarchs, powers limited, all this stuff. So now scroll down to the part about the French and Indian War, okay? Because that's where we're going to go next. You can tell we have some ideas brewing here, right? Basically, French and Indian War, we have two egos in the room and there's not enough room for both of them, and that's going to be the French and the British. So the title's misleading. Even though Native Americans are going to fight on both sides, we're talking about the French and Indian War, okay? Now, keep in mind something's going to happen here that I think is quite sad. Before this time, the colonies are just like this melting pot, and there's lots of diversity. We talked about Native Americans. We talked about the French, the Dutch, the trading. Africans mostly coming because they are taken from Africa, not of their own accord, right? But you have such diversity. You have all these different groups. They're all trading. After the French and Indian War, because the British are going to win, it becomes a lot more all one like British area, okay? It becomes a lot more homogeneous, and it was much more heterogeneous before, right? And that frontier, that unregulated kind of way of life is still going to exist to the west, but we're not going to see it as much anymore on the East Coast, and things are really going to change after this. So the bottom line is the French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, France and England are vying for power of North America, specifically of the fur trade, okay? They want the fur trade. And remember, the French have been embedded in North America for quite some time. We know that they were often closer with the Native Americans, often taking Native American wives, etc. And the British, on the other hand, just had so many people come in with their families, right? So they're taking up lots and lots of room. And when we realize there's some skirmishing in the Ohio River Valley, a very young George Washington, his hair is brown at that point, crazy, is going to be fighting there. When we know the fighting is going to take place, each kind of want to tally up Native Americans on their side. So right away the British ally with the Iroquois League, which we know is the Five Nations. The French are going to ally with a lot of those northeastern tribes, and the fighting again is going to start in 1754. So when the colonists have this going on, again, this is their land, this is where their homes are, for the most part, we're talking like 90% of people don't give it a second thought. They're like, okay, England is my sovereign, I am loyal to the king, of course I'll fight in this. A few people aren't sure if it's their fight. And oftentimes these are more poor people, indentured servants, who are being told, hey, go fight for the king. And they're like, yeah, what if a Native American attack comes? Well, I'm fighting, and my wife and my children are not going to be defended here, right? So they start to think about what is their best interest, what is the best interest for the king, and are they necessarily the same thing? And some people in the back of their minds are kind of thinking, I'm not so sure they are. So keep in mind, it's just like a little burgeoning seedling at this point, right? And it's going to grow and become bigger before the revolution, of course, but right now it's not totally there. But there's some ideas, people asking, is this my fight or is this Britain's fight, right? So the first attempt ever of the colonies to unify themselves, very important to know, Benjamin Franklin helps to put this together. It's called the Albany Plan of Union, okay? Albany Plan of Union, and I'll show you guys in class. It's that famous snake, real good propaganda. It says join or die. We weren't messing around, but basically saying, hey, maybe we have our own interests, and maybe we need to get those together and unify so we can better take on what's going on in our colonies. A good part of the war, whenever you have a war, usually it's an increase in profits. So think about, for us, it's more shipbuilding, more indigo for uniforms, all that stuff. So this war industry gives us a little perk with that two main commanders on each side. The British commander is Edward Braddock. The French commander is Marquis de Montcalm. And back then, if you had control of a fort, you had control of the whole surrounding area, because we said so much is hardcore wild wilderness, right? So this is my super high-tech illustration. Are you ready? This is what it was like. You had this fort in the middle, and there's miles and miles around it. If you controlled the fort, just like castles in Europe, right? If you controlled that castle, you controlled all the land around it. Same with forts. We know we have so many here. Fort George, Fort Niagara. We can even look at the architecture of them and see that different parts of it were built at different times. Some look really French in architecture, some look really British. That's because they're constantly changing ownership because of all the fighting, right? So the French are victorious at first. They know the land better. They've been closer with Native Americans. It's unfamiliar territory for a lot of these British soldiers coming in, right? They take Fort William Henry, Fort Ticonderoga, but then a guy comes in whose name is William Pitt. We know later on what's going to be named after him. Pittsburgh. You got it. And it's going to have the tide turn when he comes in. He takes back Fort Ticonderoga, he takes Fort Niagara right near us, and then he takes Crown Point. And when he does this, eventually, he even takes Quebec, which we know is going to be this very French stronghold, and France is going to surrender soon after. That is like an extremely fast version of how those battles go down. And remember, Native Americans integral on both sides. The war's aftermath, the Treaty of Paris gives the British all the land. If this is the Mississippi River, they get all that land east of the Mississippi River, right? So from the Mississippi to the coastline, they get all of that, right? So the French aren't totally gone, but most of them are going to move up into those strongholds in Canada. Native Americans that allied themselves with the French, most of them have lost a lot of land, a lot of power. And we're going to see this after every war. After the French-Indian War, after the Revolutionary War, the power of Native Americans is going to continue to dwindle, unfortunately. And we're going to see this highlighted with the guy whose name is Pontiac. Now if you think about Pontiac, think about where you know that word. From cars, right? Where do they make a lot of cars in this country? You're right, in Michigan. I can hear you. And if we think about this, this is where Pontiac's tribe is from, because later on when they make cars in places like Detroit, etc., they're going to name this after him. So Pontiac's rebellion is from 62 to 66. And this is basically people who were super frustrated, right? That the British did not really give them what they said they would, that the British kicked them out of that eastern land. And Pontiac's rebellion was huge. We talked about all this back and forth. They get 8 forts. These guys clean up 8 forts. They take them. And then this is just so dirty on behalf of the British. The British give them blankets for the winter, pretending they're being nice. And these blankets they know are infested with smallpox. And then Pontiac and his men are going to get smallpox from these infected blankets. And that's just terrible, right? My goodness. After the war, we know the Treaty of Paris ends the war in 1763. 1763 is also the same year as the Proclamation of 1763. And this is going to be kind of a dual thing. If we look at it face value, it means Native Americans moved west of the Appalachian Mountains, and we have that land now from the Appalachian to the coast, the East Coast, just for colonists. This is just the beginning of Native Americans getting shoved west. And also, this is Britain's sly way of saying to the colonists, hey, we almost lost you. We think you're super valuable. We really like mercantilism. We want to keep an eye on you. So you're going to see them now kind of say, hey, colonists, stay right here. But it's for your protection. We're reading into it a lot. If you ever see a multiple choice question on that, it's really colonists get that land, Native Americans move west. But keep that in mind. I would argue that who loses out most in this war? Native Americans. Losing major land, major power, dissolves a lot of tribes, smallpox continues, lots of people are going to be displaced after this, and you and I are going to watch some of The Last of the Mohicans in class because it takes place right in the middle of this French and Indian War, written by James Fenimore Cooper. This is the movie adaptation. And at the very end, there's a Native American now reflecting on the war being over, all the changes that have happened to his tribe and his family. And the title kind of gives it away, right? The Last of the Mohicans. We know where this is going. He says something very, very pretentious. And he says, we will either be no more or we will be not us, about Native Americans from here moving forward now that the frontier has changed and all of this. And unfortunately, that's exactly what we're going to see. We're going to see so many people die, and we're going to see those that are left find it very tough and very impossible to live as they have been, right? in a way that is true and resonates with their identity. So that's it for the French-Indian War and what's going on in England with the Glorious Revolution. I hope you liked our first video. Thanks for listening to me talk so much, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.